If you got a moment, sign in the chat box. Let us know who's here. See some familiar faces. I see some new faces. Just let us know who's here today. We'll get started in just a moment. Welcome, everyone. Hey, I see people signing in. Great. Camp Happy Days is here. Dorchester seniors from one extreme to the other. Kids to the seniors. Youth Corps, great. A lot of friends. We have a big, not surprisingly, but we have a big interest in today's topic, and I think our speakers as well. So getting everyone into the room here. We'll just get started in a moment. Just a little time to get situated. Great. See people from across the state. That's the other thing that's cool, you know, having all of our colleagues from across the state joining these calls. Wonderful. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know we have a full hour planned with our guest speakers today, and people will continue joining us, but let me get started. Again, for those of you that don't know me or haven't been on one of these calls over the last 11 months, I am Debbie Nelson with Together SC, and I help to coordinate the content that we deliver to you in various ways online. I always love hearing from you, love new ideas as we're generating content for 2021 and topics. Please let me know that, but delighted to see so many of you in the room. Today's topic I feel really excited about because it started at a time before our world turned. Back in March of last year, we had the Together SC Summit on racial equity, facing race together. And we were all together, you know, knocking elbows before we went into lockdown. And at that summit, we had a lot of amazing speakers, but the two individuals you're going to hear from today were in a session that was ranked the highest by all of you. I mean, I don't want to put them on the spot before I get started, but people that went to their session at the summit just said, oh, wow, they got like 5, you know, our high score was 5. They got the highest score, and people really enjoyed hearing from them. So I'll tell you a little more about our speakers, but you know, just based on that, I thought, well, let's see if we can convert from an in-person format to an online format. And we kick off 2021 with Ricaye Harris and Ottilia Scanlon. These women work at Milliken and Company in Spartanburg, so they hail from the upstate and have roles in their HR department. Ricaye has been there, actually, I was looking, she's been there 16 years at Milliken, and she currently, though has come through a number of roles, is currently the Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Ottilia has been there, I think since 2015, I want to say, is that right? Yep, she's nodding her head. But she is their Director of Learning and Development. So I have an interest in what she does because that's kind of what I do for Together SC as well. So these ladies are going to talk to us about a topic that at the summit was called, Are You In? Being inclusive. But while this was something they talked about in March of 2020, so much has changed in our world. And when we started talking about how they were going to deliver this, we said, you know, you can't do the exact same topic. We are faced in another reality right now. We need to make this current to our time. So even if you heard them and you were the one that gave them a 5 at the summit, you're going to hear some really new information and a new framing of it today from our dear friends. It is just timely information. So we're going to talk today about bias, privilege, and how we can become better allies. And I love that and how they framed it, because we all know that that's been on all of our minds in the last, since last summer in the murder of George Floyd, but even beyond. But I think, you know, that was just a pivotal moment for all of us. So with that, I say welcome to all of the folks in the room, and I turn it over to Ricaye, Ricaye Harris. Thank you for being here, Ricaye.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Together SC and crew. We are excited about another opportunity to share with you this afternoon. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. And she's right. There's a lot that has transpired over the course of the past year. And as we think about our question today, are you inclusive? Are you in, right? Our intent is that we focus on the environment around us, and do we promote or give off this vibe or have a culture within our organizations where every associate, every team member, every colleague feels like they can bring their true, best, authentic self to work each and every day, right? And that means even in the midst of a global pandemic, am I free to say, you know what? Today, I'm really not feeling my best, and being okay to talk through that. Am I able to say, you know what? The murder of George Floyd has really bothered me. Am I okay in this environment to talk about it? And so I want to make sure that after this session, we all take a close look in the mirror at ourselves and look and ask ourselves, do we allow people to be real? And that's really what we want to focus on during our conversation today. And I'll start it with a survey that Kenji Yoshino sent out. He's the author of the book Covering. He was an Asian law professor, and he basically discussed his journey of coming out as an Asian law professor and the struggle that he had. And he went through what we call covering, right? And we all do it, right? A lot of us, right? It was the fact that even 45% of straight white men cover, right? There's this norm, right? A profile norm that we all try to fit into. And so we'll downplay certain things. And so he sent out this survey, just curious, to 3,000 employees and 20 large organizations across 10 industries to figure out how are other associates handling or bringing themselves to work each and every day. And these organizations were not like Milliken, just 3 years in on their journey, but they were strong, solid, committed companies with D&I, messages and quotes all over their walls, their websites, shouted from the mountaintops. But here are some of the statistics. 61% said they faced overt or implicit pressure to cover up in some way or downplay their differences from the mainstream. 66% felt it significantly undermined their sense of self. And 50% stated that it diminished their sense of commitment to the organization. Just a couple more that I'll pop up here, right? 57% avoided sticking up for their group altogether. And then the last one is 18% limited contact with members of a group that they belong to. So this says, even though we might feel like we are an inclusive individual or that our companies do promote an inclusive culture, there's always going to be work that we have to do to ensure that every associate feels respected, feels valued, and feels engaged. And so basically it says we're on a never-ending, nonstop journey. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And as we look at promoting inclusion, it's something that requires daily work. And I just wanted to reemphasize that, all right? And so as you think about this daily work, diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion, at Milliken, we say, look, we want to welcome all people and value and embrace their differences and perspectives. Diversity is on this line right now. The second that we had 2 people join the call, we had diversity. Even if those 2 people were identical twins, we still have diversity, right? It's basically a point at which things differ. Inclusion says, I'm going to be intentional about leveraging those differences for the betterment of the organization, knowing that high-performing teams are better for business, right? Business cases out there studies show that there's a solid business case, right? Not necessarily a direct causation, but strong D&I, DE&I programs show a good correlation with business financial results and outcomes. So the question becomes, not only are we just welcoming diversity into the door, but once inside your 4 walls, what's the culture like of that organization? And how do your associates, your colleagues, your teammates, how do they feel when they're inside your teams? So I want to start right off the bat with the who do you think activity. And this is going to require either you to use your cell phone or go to another web browser on your laptop and go to that website that you see there, www.menti.com. And it's going to prompt you for a code. And I'm going to switch my screen to get there, just a second. Oh, I can't see at the top. The code is 9132769. Again, that's www.menti.com. And the code is 913276 9. And if someone, Ottilia, if you want to drop that in the chat for me. I'm going to ask a couple of questions here. And I want this, in this exercise, if you think long, you think wrong, right? This is, you know, a quick, who do you think? So it means we go with that first initial gut reaction. So who do you think is a part-time associate? I'm going to flash this one more time. 913276 9 is the code. 913276 9. Who do you think is a part-time associate? And I just like to play along, right? So I'm just going to assume that you guys assume somewhere around option 3. I don't know. Let's just see. Oh, yeah, Ricaye's good. I see you, Tish. She's like, yeah, man. Okay. All right. Next question. Who do you think works in IT? That's right. Give me those quick ones, those quick initial reactions. All right. I'll wait a couple more seconds, get a few more people here. All right. I'm going to assume that you guys are thinking maybe option 1. Oh, I'm so good. I'm so good. All right, next question. Who do you think is the CEO? Why not option 4, possibly? Okay, okay, okay. Who do you think graduated from college? This one goes always, it's all across the board on this one, honestly. Yes, but it's always interesting to point out that the CEO never goes to college. We always know who he is, but he never goes to school. All right, it's always the same. All right, and then 2 more. Who do you think grew up in a single parent home? All right, I'm thinking you guys probably option 2. Oh yeah, I'm good. All right. And then this last question is going to be, you know, a little bit different, but where do our thoughts about people come from? And you'll see 3 comment fields. You can give me 1 word and hit submit, or you give me 3 different words and hit submit. Probably not a full sentence or a paragraph, maybe just a short phrase, but where do our thoughts about people come from? A few more coming in. I'll go ahead and start sharing. So word cloud is going to appear. Obviously, bigger, bolder responses are in the center, meaning multiple people selected that. So media, family, parents, stereotypes, friends, experiences, peers, statistics, community, environment, education, prejudices, community, et cetera, right? Blind spots, you guys are great, right? Visuals, things that we see, bias, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I hate to burst the bubble, but we're still going to have bias. We're still going to have prejudice. We're still going to have stereotypes even after this hour luncheon today. But the thought is that we at least start the conversation. And so today we want to focus in on that word there, you know, bias, experience, stereotypes, media, all of that basically, because it impacts, whether we believe it or not, the decisions that we make on a daily basis. And so let's talk about what exactly is bias. So bias is a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way that is considered unfair. Right? And so that means I'm going to focus on those bold orange words, but unfair, right? Usually considered unfair. That means that there's a time when bias is fair. It's okay to prefer a Snickers versus a Twix. It is okay to prefer Pepsi versus Coke, right? We run into an opportunity, or it becomes a challenge when my bias for Pepsi or Coke gives someone an advantage or a disadvantage because of it, right? My background is also in recruiting, same with Ottilia. So we've looked at several resumes, been on tons of interviews and phone screens, et cetera, right? If someone went to the same school that we went to, we might have a bias, an affinity there, right? So the bias would be in favor. It's possible that if someone went to Wofford like I did, I just put their resume on the top of the pile. Now, someone say that's not really biased because it seems like it's positive, but no, I'm giving someone an advantage and discounting maybe a Clemson resume, kind of making my bias be against them. And that's how quickly it shows up. I have never met this person, right? I'm just simply going by the resume. I've got a school, I've got a name, I've got a major, I have the address, and all of those factors. As I'm reading them, I'm developing this profile of what I think this person is supposed to look like, act like, how intelligent they will be, et cetera. And I've never met them. And so we have to guard against those personal biases that we bring, because if I'm not careful, that bias will cause me to treat someone in favor of or against, right? So we got to be careful. It shows up in the workplace like this. Affinity bias, the tendency to warm up to people like ourselves. I'm not going to go through all of these, right? But the main one that I will point out is perception bias, which is basically what we are experiencing in our country today, right? We basically form stereotypes and assumptions about a certain group that make it difficult to make an objective judgment. One bad apple has spoiled the bunch. And anytime we meet a person that looks anywhere remotely close, same height, same weight, race, ethnicity, gender, whatever, we've automatically got either a positive or negative experience, but usually negative. So how do we basically tell ourselves that, look, each new encounter is an opportunity to create a new experience. I cannot tie this new candidate, this new team member's experience to someone else that I used to work with or someone else that used to be a part of this circle. Every new encounter is an opportunity to create a new experience. And so we have to challenge ourselves in that way. And I think, so let's go back to Mentimeter one more time. Well, first, let me show this one more time. So affinity bias, halo, perception bias, confirmation bias, groupthink, okay? Go back to Mentimeter, and I'm gonna ask one more question as it relates to bias. And the question is simply, have you ever experienced or witnessed any of those types of biases before? Wow. All right. And still coming in, right? 100% yes. We deal with this on a daily basis. And so how do we overcome? We've got to become better as individuals, ultimately impacting our companies, ultimately impacting our community. But it starts with us making that personal, intentional effort to say, I'm going to get better. I'm going to check myself of my own biases that I'm bringing to this decision. All right. And so I'm going to toss it over to Ottilia to talk more about how we can basically become stronger allies and remove a little bit of the bias that we have.
Let me unmute myself so you can all hear me. Thank you so much, Ricaye, and thank you for doing a great job of really just setting us up and starting the conversation to get us thinking about our biases and what they mean and what they might look like. And one of the things we think about as we move across our allyship journey and we think about being stronger allies, one of the things that I think is important to do is to take a step back and recognize that a lot of times our biases, not only do they come from our experiences and our backgrounds and where we get our news from and what TV shows we watch and who we surround ourselves with, etc., but they also come oftentimes from a point of privilege. And so I think it's important for us to understand and kind of unpack this word privilege. So what is privilege? Privilege is, and you see the definition here on the slide, it's a special right or an advantage or an immunity granted to or available only to a particular person or group of people. So I have certain privileges that you don't have. Ricaye has certain privileges that I don't have. We all have certain privileges, certain rights, certain advantages because of the group or groups that we belong to. And so to unpack that a little bit, Ricaye, if you can go to the next slide, there is a privilege quiz. And so we're going to do a quick little activity. This quiz comes from a book called Better Allies, which if you've not read it, I would highly recommend it. Great book. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is grab a piece of scratch paper, and for each of these check boxes or each of these statements, if you can say, yes, that applies to me, go ahead and give yourself a point. And so, for example, if you're straight, meaning if you're a heterosexual, go ahead and give yourself a point. And go through this list real quickly. And what I'd recommend that you do is don't overthink it. Don't say, well, oh, sometimes I'm interrupted in meetings, but oh, am I often interrupted? Just go with your first gut instinct. So don't think too long about this. Just take 3 minutes and give yourself points. And do me a favor and give me some kind of emoticon or reaction to let me know that you're done, and then we'll move on and we'll talk through these results. So take a moment, give yourself a point for each sentence. And when you're done, give me a thumbs up, like I just added a thumbs up to my slide. I see lots of people looking up and down, so you're still doing it. All right, a couple of you are done. Give you another minute. Don't think too long about this. One more minute. About 30 more seconds. All right, so what I want you to do now is add up your points. I think that there's 24 check marks here, or 22. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but 20-ish. And so what I want you to do is go ahead and add up the tallies or the check marks on your screen. And Ricaye is going to take us back to Mentimeter. And what I'm going to ask you to do is respond in Mentimeter with where your points are at. How much privilege do you have? So if you have 0 to 5 points, select that, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, or 20 and above. And I've taken this quiz before, so I'm going to go ahead and respond as well. We'll take just a couple minutes. I'm going to go ahead and share results. So look at that. So most of us said, you know what, over half of us are in that 16 or plus that they have that much privilege. And some of us are saying, I can answer yes to almost every single one of them. I was in that category as well. And so as we think about, so what do we do with this privilege? Nobody said that I have almost no privilege, 0 to 5. We had a couple in 6 to 10, but again, most of us can say at least for half of those questions, I can say, yeah, I've got that level of privilege. And so I want to spend some time talking about what do we do about that privilege? So Ricaye, if you can take us back to the slides. And as we think about moving forward and thinking about what do we do with our privilege, one of the pieces of privilege that I want to kind of double tap on, Ricaye, if you want to go to the next slide. There you go, is something called white privilege. And we didn't talk about this specifically when we talked about privilege, but again, I think it's important that we spend a moment or two on it. Now, all of the privileges on the previous slide have nothing to do, not all of them have to do with white privilege, but it's one of those privileges that I just think in today's society, where we're at right now as a company or as a country, excuse me, I think we need to double tap on for a second. And so when I say the word white privilege, go ahead and do me a favor and in chat, and I'm going to try to pull up chat so I can see it. give me the first words that run through your mind. When I say the words white privilege, what resonates with you? What words are you thinking about? Let's see if we can read them. So advantage, ease, freedom, power. Yeah, it's one of those words that for some people it might hit a little bit close to home. Value, advantage, I like that. It's one of those words or phrases that might hit a little close to home, and for some of us it might be a tad tough to swallow. It's one of those phrases that for some people might evoke some emotion, or I've even been in conversations where it causes people to physically cringe. It makes some people feel uncomfortable. And I'm always curious as to why does it make people feel uncomfortable? I think there's a lot of, in my opinion, misguided negativity surrounding that phrase white privilege. And I don't think there has to be. It's as simple as I'm white. You all can see the color of my skin. I'm on the webcam. I'm clearly white. And because of that, I have certain privileges. I can watch TV. I can go to the movies. I can go to the grocery store. I can pick my kid up at school. I can walk through my neighborhood. I can go to Target. And most people look like me. In the world where I live, in the world where I shop, in the world where I work, in the world where I exist, white is the norm, and therefore I am the norm. In its simplest forms, that's what white privilege is. It doesn't mean that I personally have never suffered or have never had hardships. It simply means that the things that I've suffered through or the hardships that I've had have never, ever had anything to do with the color of my skin. And quite honestly, getting us as white people to see that privilege and really begin to understand the advantages that that privilege gives us, again, in my opinion, is the very first step to eradicating racism. And so let's go ahead, Ricaye, and flip to the next slide, because I want to share some examples of what white privilege looks like in the world. It's things like, what are you doing here? Do you really belong here? Or somebody walking up and saying, are you in the right place? Nobody's ever said that to me. Or, oh, that's a really great school that you went to. Did you go on an athletic scholarship? Or we've all heard this one, all lives matter. Or God made us all equal. We're all equal. What's this whole Black Lives Matter thing? Everybody's equal. All lives matter. And if I'm being very honest and transparent, and Ricaye knows this, I hope I can share this in this safe space. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was the person who said all lives matter. And that was said out of plain ignorance of not understanding that when you say things like that, you're dismissing other people's experiences. And you're saying that my experience is the same as yours, or my experience is as important as yours, or you're not as important as me. And so when you say things like that, it's a demonstration of your white privilege. People in my circle don't look down at me if I say all lives matter. But if in the circle that Ricaye, let's say, as an example, walks through, if she says Black Lives Matter, some people look down on her. That's white privilege right there. It's also never being stopped by the police or pulled over because you look suspicious, or being followed around a store because there is a perception that you can't afford to shop there, or maybe committing a certain crime and somebody else who maybe looks different than you commits the same crime and they get a different sentence or half the sentencing. There's been a ton of research that says sentencing on crimes the amount of the length of the sentence, can directly in some cases be correlated to the darkness of somebody's skin. That's white privilege. Ricaye, if you can flip to the next slide, because I want to spend a minute talking about 2020. I like to say 2020 was the year that never ended. And please end. I know 2020 technically ended 3 weeks ago, but it feels like it's still here. And when we think about 2020, I think the question is, how has white privilege impacted our society? And thinking back through the last year, how has my white privilege impacted how I interact with what's happened over the last year? Well, my white privilege, it allowed me, quite honestly, to turn my back on the events of 2020 if I wanted to. The names Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, the names of individuals that were victimized and murdered at the hands of people in power don't need to matter to me because of my white privilege. I don't have to participate in marches. I don't have to participate in protests to validate that I exist or to recognize that I'm a human being or to provide me with equality. That's my white privilege. I don't need to be concerned that if I go to the hospital with COVID or another illness, that I'm going to be treated differently because of the color of my skin. That's my white privilege. I don't have to be afraid when a police officer pulls me over for speeding or making an illegal left turn. My white privilege says I can ignore all of that if I want to. But what we try to push people to do at Milliken, what I'm challenging you to do here today, is not to turn your back, not to ignore that, but instead to turn into it and to lean into it as an ally. And Ricaye, if you can flip to the next slide for me. Let's talk about what is an ally. As an ally, I think I have a responsibility to use my privilege to lift others up. And we've got a definition up here that says an ally is a person who actively promotes and expresses their support to advance the culture of inclusion through equality that benefits all people, not just certain people, all people. And that's a great definition. I like that definition, but Ricaye actually came up with a definition I like better because it talks about ally as a verb. And because ally is a verb, it's an action. An ally acknowledges and addresses behavior. An ally listens intently to understand. An ally listens not to respond, not to tell you why your opinion is wrong, but an ally listens to understand. An ally learns through diverse interactions. And an ally, at the end of the day, if you're an ally, you're going to speak up and you're going to support. Again, an ally is not a noun, it's a verb. And so as we think about moving forward to the next slide, Ricaye, and we think about ways that we can be an ally. So what are some actionable steps and actionable things that we can do to be better allies? How can we use our privilege to be allies? The first is listen and learn. We have an allyship wheel at Milliken, and in the middle of that wheel is education. And we say that because we feel like you can't be an effective ally if you don't educate yourself, if you don't listen and learn from other people, if you don't expose yourself to authors that you may not necessarily immediately read, or watch movies or TV shows or read publications by individuals that maybe don't immediately come to you as people I'm naturally inclined to watch or read or listen to. We also want to talk about helping create an ally culture. So being an ally isn't just about speaking up when you see something wrong. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but it's also about in your workplaces and even in your communities, how can you proactively help create a culture where people don't have to speak up as much because it's an allyship culture. It's an inclusive culture. It's a culture where all voices are valued and all voices are heard. So what can you do to do that? It's things like when you're in a meeting, look around you. Is everybody who should be here at the table? If you're putting together a speaking engagement or a conference, look around or look at that agenda. Is it a diverse representation of the individuals that should be there? And then, being an ally does mean being a voice for other people. It's easy to be an ally for people you like. It's easy to be an ally for people who look like you, who act like you, who think like you, who are at the same level as you. But it's a little bit more challenging to be an ally for somebody who maybe you don't necessarily know, or you don't necessarily have as much in common, or to be an ally for somebody who's not in the room. So to make sure that you're celebrating the successes of those who are not there, and you're bringing their voices into the room and into the table if they're not heard. And then lastly, I mentioned before, being an ally isn't about staying silent or remaining on the sidelines. It's hard to do, but sometimes as an ally, you gotta speak up. You have an obligation to use your voice, to use your privilege, for the betterment of other individuals. And sometimes that means you've got to take a chance and you've got to speak up. And using your privilege, I said it before, as an ally, it's not always easy. And I'd be remiss if I said that there weren't times that I didn't look back and say, oh, you bombed that one, Ottilia. You stayed silent, or you didn't invite the right people to the table. You took the easy way out. So I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm trying to be a good ally, and I'm trying to grow in my allyship. And one of the things to do that is admitting that I have privilege, and using that privilege to help advance other individuals. I said earlier that I said that admitting that we have privilege, that certain individuals have certain privileges, is the first step. I think doing something about it, being an ally, is that next important step. And with that said, I saw some words and comments in chat, but I was trying to look and I didn't do a good job. So let me open it up to questions, Ricaye, if you want to flip to the next slide, and we can look at what's in chat, because I think there was lots of things that were coming in that I couldn't read. Let's see where we've got. So President Biden talks about returning to normal. Does that bring up images of white privilege if white is the norm for our society? If so, I hope this is unintended. I think that's Madeline. I hope I pronounced your name right. I agree with you, Madeline. I'm not sure there's a question there, or it's more of a rhetorical question, but I would agree with you. I think that I would hope that it's unintended. I think that it's probably his way of saying he wants us to return to a mask-free society, or mask-less, or COVID-free society. I would hope so. Ricaye, any comments on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with what you said. I mean, I'm assuming also possibly returning back to, not even returning back to, but just doing what should have been.
Embracing.
You know what I'm saying? And just honoring really, how the country should have been set up and getting back to what it should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think, is it Mamie? Again, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Had a comment, I lost it. Here we go. I hope it will be unintended also, and personally took it to reference to the pandemic. Your question causes me to think about this deeper and go to returning to normalcy and common sense. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I don't think that we were trying to minimize the pandemic by any stretch of the imagination, but really just point out the events of 2020 and the impact that they had on all individuals. Is it Mamie? I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Anything you want to add to that?
Mamie. Yes, and that was kind of in response to when Madeline asked the question above there about President Biden, and when he says that, return to normalcy. And so that was that I was responding to that comment at the time, that I would trust that he meant returning to civility, a sense of common sense, and not that we would return to things of the past. I have, and this is too much, I think, to go in at this time, but what that comment took me way back. And I just felt like in the last few years, we'd had so much distress and so much backward movement as far as relationships in our country, that, having, going back to a sense of normalcy, how far back do we go to get to that normalcy? And he had to have meant, as far as for me to continue to have hope, have that hope is what he had to have meant when he made that comment, was to go back to a sense of civility and a sense of common sense. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great comment. And I think that, not to take away from your comment, but to bring it back to my white privilege, I didn't even go there. And that's an example of my white privilege, that I just assumed that he meant the economy and, moving past COVID, et cetera. I didn't have to go back to anything else. And that's an example of the privilege that I have. So thank you for bringing that up. Ricaye, any comments on that?
No, I mean, a great discussion. I mean, I'm agreeing with everything.
Yep. Somebody did ask a question, should the ally culture be developed from the top down? That's a great question. And Ricaye, you want to grab that one?
Yeah. So I definitely think, I mean, the success that Milliken has had in our 3 years is definitely because of the senior leadership team that we have. I've got a great CEO, newly added to Milliken in 2 years. He came on the scene asking the right questions. His heart was in the right place. And our senior leadership team today, we still may not get it right always, right? But we are moving together towards an inclusive culture, right? And being stronger allies and making a commitment publicly. And so Halsey signed the CEO Action Pledge for Diversity and Inclusion, which says that we would commit to doing that. So we've got to make sure that we create the safe space to engage in conversations like this. We're going to make sure that we have unconscious bias and other DE&I education workshops available to bring awareness to some of these issues and continue the conversation. That we'd also share our best practices with other organizations, that we would share our strategies with the board, and that we would commit to racial equality. And so I think he didn't have to sign that, but him basically from the top down, that signal to the organization that this is important work for Milliken. And now conversations are, because of that, because of his leadership in our team, now conversations are happening everywhere, right? It started here, but now, I mean, we've got production, on up, engaging in these roundtable discussions and D&I education workshops. So it is the start, but for it to be effective, we've also got to have, from the bottom as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I kind of scanned through the chat. I didn't see any other questions. What other questions do y'all have? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Ricaye and Ottilia, I just not so much have a question, but just want to say how powerful it is that you're willing to come to a nonprofit table to share what you've been able to do at the corporate level. And honestly, Milliken isn't just a local or a South Carolina. I mean, you're a global company, and you're setting an example not only at the corporate level, but for those of us who work in the nonprofit sector to be able to follow. And I can tell all of you, I grew up next door to Roger Milliken, and he was an absolute giant in the business world. But if he were sitting in this meeting, he would say he's the perfect example of white privilege. I feel strongly about that. And Halsey Cook, who has now become a member of your team, the leader of your team, and a resident of the communities where you live, is really setting an example at the highest level. And it's really remarkable to see. And the fact, again, that you're willing to share that with those of us who do what we do says a lot. So I'm extremely proud of what you've done, and grateful for you being willing to give it to us really for free, because a lot of us don't have the resources that you have to be able to do this work, and for us to be able to partner or shadow is great. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Yes, if we were together, I'd say, Debbie, give me a steak. That's next time. That's next time. No, happy to be here. I will just add to those of you, thinking about your teams and where do you go? How do we handle or even begin to tackle this, right? The first thing I would say is you got to start the conversation. There's been a lot that's happened in the past year, right? And even going into 2021, right? There's still a lot that's going on. We've got to, as leaders, be comfortable to say, you know what? I recognize there's a lot happening. And how do I show my colleagues that I see this, that I recognize it, right? I know, look, when people, we've had, within Milliken, we've just had our 6th death, right? COVID is impacting everyone, right? When it's a funeral, we don't know what to say, right? But we try to find the words, right? I'm sorry, I am here, I do not know what you are going through, right? Something, right? Any situation that transpired over the past 12 months, we've got to be able to engage and say something that sends a signal to our teammates, colleagues that says Milliken is not ignorant to what's going on. That's all people are really looking for. Does my organization, do my team members understand what's transpiring in our culture today? And can we just open up the doors for conversation? And that's what we did. We opened up the doors and we had 300 people get on our, not the first phone call, we had 75. By the second time we had 220, the third call, 300 people on Teams, basically powerful conversation. Our senior leadership team was on the call and we just opened it up. We didn't know what we were gonna get. We laid some ground rules out there, but there was just so much that we filled up those 2 hours with stories and testimonies and tears, and everyone was moved, and it forced Milliken to continue to move to action. So find a way to just say, how are you, in a safe space? So start the conversation. And then what can you do to build a sense of community, right? So we work with, I partner with learning and development to basically bring awareness to some of these issues, right? We will teach workshop sessions on bias, on allyship, right, on inclusive leadership. We also have ERGs, or we call them associate networks, right, that basically elevate the voices of marginalized and underrepresented groups, right? What does that community look like in your organization? And is there a safe space for people to raise some of those concerns so that as allies, we can acknowledge those barriers together and work to tackle them, right? So start the conversation, find a way to build that community through education, and then, you know, getting groups or however, and then we've got to measure the commitment, right? So, I mean, I know that's, you know, this is 3 years in our journey, so I don't expect all that to happen overnight, but we try to use our org health engagement survey and look at those scores. Are we moving those in the right direction? We look at turnover. We look at, I have a DE&I scorecard that basically every period I review it with Halsey, and we're checking to see, are we making progress, right? We take our engagement survey every 18 to 24 months. Have we moved the culture in the past 2 years? And what levers do we need to continue to play? So it has to be something that you guys can hold each other accountable to ensuring that you're going to be successful in the end. So I know no one asked that, but that was just kind of like my 2 cents for, you know, where do we go? How do we start? What does this look like? But you got to start the conversation.
I was just going to say, I think you answered like 3 questions in the chat. So great job, Ricaye. A couple other questions. Somebody said, if you're small and can't afford a dedicated DEI person, who should have this role within the agency? I would say, and Ricaye, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say the person who has the passion. Ricaye, to share her story, she was a recruiter at Milliken and had worked in human resources and recruitment, and she had a passion for this. And so we didn't hire Ricaye to be our DEI person. Ricaye created that role for herself, and she created an entire organization out of her passion. And so I would say you pick the person that has the passion. Anything to add to that, Ricaye?
You hit the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head.
I'm trying to go through the other questions. Could folks see using these questions and Mentimeter with your board to explain white privilege? I've gotten a call from a member asking me to talk with a member of her board. Madeline, do you want to expand upon your question? I don't know that I completely understand it in text. Sometimes it's helped to verbalize it.
Sure. So many of our boards are majority white, and many of them are struggling with this concept of white privilege. I think the way you explained it, putting up the examples, asking people to score, talking about it, was pretty effective. And I've had a nonprofit who has been talking about this in her boardrooms and using Heather Hackman, who was the speaker at our summit, who talked about white privilege, and has had a board member that's spoken, who's disagreed with that approach. And so my question really more to other participants than to you, although I would certainly value what you two say, is could you see this being an effective tool in the boardroom using the what you did around the white privilege portion?
So let's open that up for some discussion. What do the rest of you all think?
I
Hi,
know we're,
I was going to jump in on the white privilege because I think a lot of times for certain individuals to admit that they have white privilege would mean that perhaps they're not as great as they thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard pill for some people to swallow, to think I've gotten where
Mm-hmm.
I'm at, not necessarily on my own merits. So how do you get them to acknowledge that they do have white privilege and giving other people, as bringing other people in inclusively doesn't take away from them, because that is the other half of that. If I bring more in, I'm going to get less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it's a good question, and I think from my perspective, it comes from authentic education, and authentic education by people who look like them. And so, for example, when we rolled out our unconscious bias training, I was a huge advocate. Not everybody in the room agreed with me, but I was a huge advocate that we had a white male who was one of our facilitators. And somebody point blank asked me, asked the group and asked that person, why would you be an unconscious bias facilitator? You're a white man, you don't belong here. And I pushed back pretty hard on that. It was one of those hills I was going to die on. I said, if we're going to get people at Milliken, let's be honest, they're a bunch of middle-aged white men. If we're going to get them to buy into the fact that they have biases, many of which are conscious and many that are even unconscious, they've got to hear it from people that look like them. And that's a sad statement, but it's a reality. If Ricaye and Courtney, who's on my team, who are both incredibly talented African-American women, if they're up there, it's a different reception by some people than if Ricaye and I are up there, or Cameron, who is our white male, and Ricaye are up there. And so I think but you've got to pick those, and Cameron, this white man, he was an ally. So you've got to pick those people who are authentic allies to have that authentic education. So people feel like they're not being beat up, but they're being brought into the conversation. And on the flip side of that, some people are just hopeless. They just are. And so those people, I hand them the book, White Fragility, and say, go read this. Because they're just hopeless.
I feel like,
and that's not the right answer, but it's the truth.
Ottilia and I mean, we were very intentional about our session today. Like, I was clear, like, hey, I'm going to take the beginning. And when we focus on privilege, those are your slides, right? Because I know the message will come across differently, and she can speak to an audience that I can't, right? I'm not saying that people would have turned their ears off, but I know for me to say it might come off differently. And so I was like, Ottilia, you rock those slides and you go in there and you speak to it. And because we're aware, right? I'm very cognizant that some of those messages need to be delivered from a white ally.
I was just going to say
Does that help, Shauna?
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Go
just
ahead,
wanted
Susan.
to add that a lot of what we're fighting, or whatever term we want to talk about, is just, ego, it comes down to ego, and that's a tough one. It just is, for people to really decide and see how much ego plays a role in how they look at things and their point of view and things like that, and being able to actually, take on a different point of view and all of those sorts of things. I've worked a lot with the Foundation for Critical Thinking, and we deal a lot with that idea of becoming a fair-minded person and things like that, empathetic, being intellectually empathetic, or logical and things. And oftentimes it just seems like so many people are just blinded and it's also that confirmation bias that we keep running into because everybody, nowadays, not everyone, because it's a blanket statement, but so many people will turn the news channel to what, of course we know what they want to believe in, and they hear it and they count it as truth. And so I feel as if between the confirmation bias and, with all the media things and ego, those are the things that are really, they are really hurting movement, to a point. And, we see that we work with mental health. And so there's some similarities in a sense, as far as the idea of stigma or, feeling. A lot of people don't want to talk about it, but anyway, I'll get off, but I'm off topic. Sorry. But yeah, I think that ego is a big thing that's hurting us.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, last 4 minutes, last question or comment.
No, I was just going to reference the article that we forgot about a little bit, I'll tell you, but the Kyle Korver article that's popping up in the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Kyle, he hasn't lost any money to my knowledge, right? He's still on the same team. His game is awesome, right? If anything, it's made his team better, right? Now they recognize our team, we care about each other a little bit more, right? He was able to see it, used it to his advantage, right? And started connecting more with his teammates. And so that's really, at the end of the day, better for us. That's why we talk about business. I'm not going to say that they were going to go out there and get a championship, right? But it made the team gel, right? And I'm pretty sure they know each other better, the passes, the assists, the 3-pointers. I'm a basketball player, so I love it, right? So that's what helps. As a coach, as a leader on a team, if you let me know that you see me and you understand me, I will run through the wall for you. I will stay after and shoot more threes and practice my free throws and run a few extra sprints. Same way in business. We'll be more engaged. We'll be more productive because we feel like those in leadership, those in charge, have our best interests at heart, and they value us and they see us for who we are, and they understand, what it means to really be there for their teammates. And that's essentially what we're all here to do as allies. So yeah, so read the article if you haven't had the chance to do it. Kyle Korver, NBA player, great kind of just illustration to Ottilia's point of how if he wanted to, he could have hid. He could have ignored everything and life would have been fine. Teammates might have been like, what, are you kidding me? But right, again, acknowledging and helping to address some of those barriers. So great article. Yes, we forgot all about it.
Well, this is Debbie, and I just want to thank you. We're almost at the top of the hour. I see somebody's asking something. I think they're reaffirming what you've just said, Ricaye. People who feel valuable will invest more of themselves into whatever cause or mission. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what a good moment maybe to thank you for being here today. And great idea from Tish. Have you shared this article with your trustees, or you could share this article with your trustees? I've gotten some comments in the chat box and aside saying this is something that everyone should be made aware of. It was that powerful. So thank you for sharing that and using that as a foundation for your conversation today. I know that there's been questions that people love the acronym. Ricaye, you actually came up with that acronym? So we need to attribute it to you when we're using it in our presentations going forward. But yeah, we love that ally is a verb. Obviously, we want it to their action, but we love that how you've addressed this to acknowledge and address barriers, listen intently to understand that listening is sometimes really difficult for many of us. So listen, learn through diverse interaction, and finally, speak up and support. That's the you, that's where the action comes in. So we love that. We will be sending out this slide deck, if it's okay with Ottilia and Ricaye. We'll be sending out the slide deck. We will also make available this recording. There's been some really good, deep interaction. I hope everyone's okay with that. But we appreciate your candor and your transparency and speaking up about these difficult issues, but that's how we're going to move forward. And I think that's the whole nature of what they've shared with us today. You two are amazing. We all want you to come and work with our organization. I think that's the main thing I'm getting is that where do we bottle this up and use this in our organizations? Because many times nonprofits just don't have the resources that you're demonstrating you have within your organization. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing the work. We just don't often have those resources that Milliken is fortunate to have, and have the leadership at the helm that really supports this work. I think that's often where we're challenged as well. So we appreciate it. You deserve a 5-star rating for today. And I welcome all of you. We're popping off at 1 o'clock. It's time to close out. But if Ricaye and Ottilia want to stay on a minute or two, and if anyone has a question, if that's okay with you, we will allow that to happen. And for those of you that need to move on to the rest of your day, please feel comfortable doing that. And please keep reading our newsletter for Good Connections, where you'll see all kinds of great happenings that are going to be here over the next months. And you'll join us again for another one of our conversations. We actually have our removing our blinders segment, which is somewhat similar to what we did today. But removing our blinders segment, which is coming up next week on February 4th. And I say that, and someone might need to correct me because I'm doing it from memory and I don't actually have a memory. It is actually the 4th. Removing our blinders next week. And Tom Keith of Sisters of Charity, as a white leader, will share his personal growth and organizational growth around these very same issues that we talked about today. So I invite you to sign up at Together SC. And with that, I'll say thank you to everyone and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Yeah.